February 1944. The war had swallowed Europe whole. Every night, the skies trembled under the roar of bombers and the crack of anti-aircraft fire. From the frozen airfields of Italy, the 452nd Bomb Group prepared for another long-range raid into the heart of Nazi industry. A mission so routine that no one bothered to remember its code name. 12 B-17 flying fortresses, each armed with a crew of 10, lifted off into a moonless sky that promised turbulence and death in equal measure. The first hours went as expected. Formation was tight, altitude steady, radios clear, the aircraft cut through heel-to-toed winds, their engines humming like the synchronized heartbeats of a single metallic beast. At 23:47, radar stations in northern Italy confirmed their return. 12 bright signatures slicing over the Alps in perfect formation, an image of precision and discipline. But then, as the squadron approached the Austrian frontier, the signals began to distort. The dots wavered, flickered, and one by one, disappeared. Controllers assumed an equipment malfunction, operators recalibrated, switched frequencies, and checked for enemy interference. Nothing. The screens were blank. The sky, once alive with the pulse of returning heroes, had gone dead silent. There were no radio calls, no SOS, no explosions, no static, just the slow hum of empty air. In the valleys below, villagers were awakened by a strange glow bleeding through the clouds. They described it as the color of frozen lightning, a pale, electric shimmer that hung motionless above the peaks. 12 silhouettes passed overhead, immense, gleaming shapes that drifted without sound. They moved too slowly for bombers, too smoothly for anything made by men. Some claimed they could see the engines spinning, but no sound reached their ears, as though the world itself had been muted. For nearly 5 minutes, the silent procession crossed the night, then vanished into the fog. By dawn, no trace remained. Allied command received no word. The 12 aircraft never reached their base. Search and rescue units combed the mountain passes for weeks, but found no wreckage. New oil stains, not even a scrap of metal. The snow beneath the flight path was undisturbed, untouched by fire, impact, or footprints. It was as if 48 men and 12 aircraft had dissolved into the thin alpine air. The investigation stretched on for months. Meteorologists found no record of electrical storms. Enemy intercept logs were blank. No German unit reported shooting down a single bomber that night. Pilots who had flown in adjacent formations swore they'd seen the 452nd S lights for most of the journey, and then, suddenly, nothing but empty darkness. When the report was finalized, it carried the signature of Colonel Arthur J. Mendez, a man known for his precision and skepticism. His closing words were clinical, but they carried a weight of quiet disbelief. No mechanical explanation can be established. No environmental anomalies detected. Squadron presumed lost over the Alps. Cause unknown. Yet even years later, the mystery refused to fade. Local shepherds claimed they sometimes heard the echo of engines on still winter nights. Faint, rhythmic, and distant, like the heartbeat of machines buried under snow. Some airmen stationed near the same routes years later reported seeing ghostly contrails drifting through the stars, perfectly aligned where no planes had flown. The Alps kept their secret well. The 12 bombers were never found, their serial numbers never recovered, their crews never buried. They became whispers in the mountain wind, a squadron erased not by enemy fire, but by something older and far less understood. And so, the night radar went blind and the sky fell silent. A legend was born. The Ghost Squadron of the Alps. The formation that vanished between the living and the dead. When the report of the vanishing formation reached Allied High Command in Naples, the initial reaction was bureaucratic disbelief. Missing squadrons were not uncommon. Weather, flak, and navigation errors swallowed aircraft every week, but the radar technicians in Turin refused to accept navigational error as an explanation. They had witnessed something they could not explain. A distortion, a pulse that seemed to echo back from the void where the planes had been. At 23:48, 1 minute after the 12 blips vanished, a low-frequency vibration rippled through the radar receivers. It wasn't static or feedback. It was structured, 12 beats, precisely timed, evenly spaced, resonating like the synchronized hum of aircraft engines. The technicians replayed the signal repeatedly that night, the faint metallic throb resonating through the equipment room like a ghost heartbeat. Then, suddenly, silence. The machines went dead! Power returned 30 seconds later, but the sky was empty. The data was forwarded to London for analysis. Weeks later, engineers from British intelligence amplified the recording and ran it through signal decomposition equipment at Bletchley Park. What they found defied category. Beneath the 12 tones lay a subfrequency, impossibly low and irregular, not mechanical, not atmospheric. It shifted subtly, as if responding to the sound above it, almost like a second voice beneath the hum of engines. The engineers noted in their report that it displayed rhythmic variability consistent with biological rather than mechanical resonance. The phrase was quietly removed from later versions of the document. Meanwhile, reports began to spread through the Alps in the weeks following the disappearance. Villagers in isolated valleys described hearing faint droning overhead, though the skies remained clear. A shepherd near Innsbruck claimed that his flock panicked at midnight. Scattering across the slopes as a heavy wind without sound rolled over the valley. Days later, Italian monks in a mountain monastery recorded in their weather log. Lights passed above the clouds. No fire, no thunder, no storm. The night was still. In April 1944, a British reconnaissance flight retraced the same route over the Alps, equipped with new radio equipment designed to prevent frequency interference. Halfway through the mission, all communications failed. When contact returned 2 minutes later, the pilot's voice trembled over the channel. He claimed he had heard human voices whispering through the static, clear, calm, unmistakably English. The words were repeated 3 times in perfect unison. Formation holds. Engine steady. The voices continued for 30 seconds before fading completely. When the recording was reviewed, intelligence officers confirmed the transmission, but there were no corresponding Allied frequencies active in the area. The pilot's call sign and coordinates matched those of the missing 452nd Bomb Group. The tape was classified immediately, labeled Atmospheric Phenomena Level Red. The file was buried in the Royal Air Force Archives. Privately, engineers speculated that strange atmospheric inversions above the Alps could create phantom echoes, causing radar and radio signals to loop, reflecting ghost transmissions from the past. The official explanation described it as a temporal echo caused by upper atmospheric refraction. But those who had heard the 12 pulses and the whispering voices were unconvinced. Captain Henry Fowler, the chief radar analyst in Turin, later wrote in his diary, an entry never meant for official eyes. We heard them after they were gone. 12 engines, 12 hearts, still beating somewhere beyond the noise. I've studied machines my entire life. Whatever crossed those mountains that night, it wasn't just metal. By the time spring thawed, the Alpine passes rumors had already transformed the incident into myth. Soldiers began calling it the Silent Squadron. Technicians at the radar post swore that once every few weeks, their screens would flicker 12 faint returns, hovering for a second before fading into nothing. It became a ritual to mark the time, 23:47. Every time it happened, the room would fall quiet. No one spoke. No one breathed. And always in the static between channels. Some claimed they could still hear it, the soft murmur of engines. Steady and synchronized, holding formation beyond the reach of the living. When the guns of Europe finally went silent, not all mysteries of the war were buried with it. In the spring of 1946, the Allied command authorized Operation Alpine Retrieval, a discreet mission intended to recover the wreckage of aircraft lost over the Central Alps. Officially, it was an exercise in closure, military term for finding the bones. Unofficially, certain intelligence officers were looking for one thing only: the missing 12 B-17s of the 452nd Bomb Group, last seen gliding across the mountains into nothing. The operation began from a small outpost in Tier. American and British engineers, mountaineers, and weather experts joined forces, combing ridges and valleys where no human had walked since the war. They expected twisted aluminum, shattered wings, or engines buried in snow. Instead, what they found near the Grossglockner Glacier defied every law of physics they knew. At an elevation above 3,000 meters, the team stumbled upon 3 perfect circular depressions pressed into ancient ice, each 4 meters wide, evenly spaced in a triangular pattern, exactly like the footprint of landing gear. But there was no melt, No deformation of the surroundings. The impressions were sharp, as though something immense had rested there without weight. When the lead geologist tried to measure the depth, his probe stopped abruptly against a thin, invisible resistance, as if the ice itself remembered the shape of what had touched it. A day later, a second team discovered a small metallic object lodged in a nearby crevasse. It was an oxygen regulator, the kind fitted inside B-17 bombers. The serial number matched one of the missing aircraft, yet the condition of the part was impossible, uncorroded, gleaming beneath frost, as though it had been placed there yesterday. Laboratory tests back in London revealed an alloy composition that did not correspond to wartime Boeing materials. Its crystalline structure showed signs of atomic rearrangement. The metal fused with an unknown element that strengthened it far beyond standard aluminum. One scientist described it as an engineered metal that shouldn't exist, as if the alloy had learned how to resist decay. The findings were quietly removed from the report. Only a single line was left in the final document. Fragment recovered, composition inconsistent with known manufacturing. Locals had already begun to weave legends around the disappearances. The villagers of Heiligenblatt called the Squadron Die Nebelflieger, the Fog Flyers, on still winter nights. Shepherds claimed they heard engines humming far above the clouds, their rhythm steady and organized, like the beat of 12 synchronized hearts. Climbers returning from high altitudes spoke of a strange glow along the glacier face, faintly green, like moonlight trapped inside ice. One mountaineer swore he found a parachute frozen mid-fold, its canvas immaculate, every strap perfectly coiled, waiting, untouched, as if expecting its owner to return. The Austrian press eventually caught wind of the story. Articles spoke of ghost bombers and haunted passes, but Western authorities swiftly dismissed them as folklore. Yet behind locked doors in Washington and London, the incident refused to fade. By 1950, newly declassified RAF archives revealed something chilling. Post-war radar scans over the region still registered 12 recurring anomalies, moving west to east across the exact flight path of the missing formation. Each event occurred in precise intervals of 93 days, too regular for weather interference, too consistent for coincidence. In 1953, early American satellite prototypes detected faint electromagnetic disturbances at the same coordinates. The data, when plotted, formed a straight line, a formation matching the spacing of 12 B-17s flying in echelon. The anomalies appeared, drifted slowly, and vanished again into static, as though continuing a mission long after the crews were gone. The CIA labeled the phenomenon Echo Flight, placing it under restricted Cold War monitoring and classified memos between US and British intelligence. Analysts argued whether the readings were simply reflections from upper atmospheric storms or something far stranger. Perhaps a residual electromagnetic imprint, a kind of technological haunting. One note, scribbled in the margin of a 1954 report, read, "If these signals are echoes, they are repeating a flight plan that never ended." And so, amid the silence of the Alps, science and superstition met on equal ground. Somewhere between ice and sky, 12 shadows kept moving, silent, tireless, and unseen, as though bound to the path they flew, forever circling a war that had long since ended. By the early 1960s, interest in the lost 452nd Squadron had faded from public record. But within the quiet corridors of Cold War research, the story refused to die. In 1962, a British physicist named Dr. Alan Harker, a former RAF radar engineer and post-war consultant for NATO communications, reignited the controversy with a paper that shocked the scientific community. His publication, titled Aerial Temporal Resonance and Atmospheric Imprinting, suggested that under certain electromagnetic conditions, the very fabric of the atmosphere could retain the echo of human-made machinery, a kind of ghost field born of power, motion, and repetition. Harker's theory proposed that aircraft moving through areas of strong overlapping radio frequencies might charge the ionosphere with their signatures, the combined output of heat, vibration, and electromagnetic radiation, forming a temporary energy imprint. He called it aerial temporal resonance. According to his calculations, if the resonance was strong enough, it could distort not only radio reflection but time perception itself, creating what he described as a self-sustaining atmospheric echo, a loop of energy replaying fragments of the original event indefinitely. Buried deep in the paper was a single, provocative example: the 452nd Bomb Group. Harker believed their final flight crossed through a unique, convergence zone above the Alps, where Allied radar beams from Italy and Britain intersected with natural geomagnetic currents running through the mountains. The overlapping signals, he argued, might have created a closed electromagnetic chamber powerful enough to interfere with navigation, radio function, and even molecular stability. If the resonance had trapped their energy patterns, and possibly the aircraft themselves, they would remain suspended in a timeless state of repetition, still flying but outside conventional physics. The paper caused a brief academic uproar before disappearing entirely. Officially, it was retracted due to methodological flaws. Unofficially, Harker's employer, the Ministry of Defense, classified his research under the Experimental Propagation Division, sealing it from public access. Colleagues later recalled that Harker received an unmarked envelope containing declassified Alpine radar maps just before he withdrew his work. Within weeks, his home was searched and his research equipment confiscated. Yet Harker continued his experiments in secret. In 1969, he purchased land near the Swiss border and built a makeshift observatory, equipped with surplus radar dishes and analog OSP. Locals recalled seeing strange bursts of light over the peaks at night, white flares that shimmered without sound, pulsing in symmetrical intervals. Harker claimed to be recording sky echoes, electromagnetic reflections that repeated the same 12-point pattern seen in the Lost Squadron S formation. In 1973, he vanished. His cabin was found empty except for a notebook filled with equations, sketches of radar waves bending over mountain ridges, and one final entry written in red pencil. They're still there and still flying. Investigators also discovered a map on his desk with coordinates matching the last recorded radar point of the missing B-17 SCA. Nearby tape recorder held static, interrupted by faint rhythmic pulses, 12 beats, perfectly timed, fading into silence. Around that same year, reports began to surface from Swiss mountain guides and weather patrols. Climbers spoke of luminous objects appearing over the valleys, moving slowly in tight formation, maintaining equal spacing, too slow for jets, too deliberate for meteors. They emitted no sound, no contrail, no visible propulsion. When helicopters attempted to approach, the lights flickered and vanished, leaving only a faint odor of burned ozone and melted snow that smelled faintly of aviation fuel. NATO dispatched a technical team to investigate. Their report, quietly filed under atmospheric phenomena, classified, noted intense magnetic fluctuations at high altitude, and a scorched patch of snow 30 meters wide, its surface chemically altered by heat with no visible ignition source. No wreckage, no debris, just a melted circle. Still warm hours after discovery. In later decades, physicists would revisit Harker's theories under new names: electromagnetic echo anomalies, localized time drift, ionospheric resonance, loops, yet none dared to cite him directly. The implications were too unsettling. If his calculations were even partially correct, the 452nd Squadron had not simply vanished. It had been recorded by the Earth itself, replayed endlessly in a sky that remembered the war too well. And somewhere above the frozen peaks, the silence still carries a pulse, the ghost heartbeat of 12 engines, trapped forever in the thin air between time and memory. Even now, the story of the Ghost Squadron lingers in the high valleys of the Alps, not as a tale of fantasy, but as a persistent echo the mountains refuse to forget. Historians dismiss it as wartime myth, born from exhaustion, radio distortion, and superstition. But to those who live beneath those ridges, the silence itself still carries the hum of something that refuses to end. In February of 1998, a European weather satellite passing over the Eastern Alps captured what analysts first labeled as a thermal irregularity. 12 distinct heat signatures appeared over the mountains, perfectly spaced, moving northeast in formation across nearly 300 kilometers of rugged terrain. No civilian or military aircraft were scheduled in that airspace. No radar system, commercial or military, confirmed a single contact. Yet the satellite's infrared sensors recorded clear motion, symmetrical, deliberate, precise. For 6 minutes, they held pattern. Then, one by one, they vanished. A young analyst named Marcus Llewellyn, reviewing the data weeks later, noticed something unsettling. The coordinates of the formation matched down to the degree the 1944 mission route of the missing 452nd Bomb Group. The same heading, same altitude, same time of night. When he overlaid the data, the tracks aligned perfectly, as if the ghosts of that mission had reappeared, continuing a flight long thought lost to ice and time. The anomaly was quietly buried in a classified NATO archive under atmospheric glare. False positives. But whispers leaked. Within months, amateur radio enthusiasts across northern Italy began reporting bursts of static at specific intervals, 12 short pulses followed by faint, indistinct voices repeating fragments of wartime jargon. Formation holds, engines steady. Altitude nominal! Those who caught the transmissions said the voices were clipped, mechanical, distant, as if spoken through 60 years of static. Airline pilots who crossed that corridor during the winter months began reporting odd distortions on their instruments, compass needles drifting, altimeters twitching, flight computers briefly resetting with timestamps reading 1944.02 13 before stabilizing again. Most dismissed it as interference from magnetic storms. A few didn't. One veteran cargo pilot swore that during a night crossing near in, he saw faint lights above the cloud layer, not strobes or navigation beacons, but a soft blue luminescence moving in formation. He counted 12. They made no sound, no turbulence, and as his aircraft banked, they simply dissolved into the sky, leaving behind a faint vibration in his headset, the low hum of 12 synchronized engines fading into silence. By the early 2000s, the legend had grown beyond folklore. Scientists tried to explain it with plasma reflections, temperature inversions, or lensing effects caused by polar. None of the theories accounted for the precision or the fact that the sightings always aligned with the same coordinates, the same Daichi, the same path. In 2006, a climber scaling the southern face of the Grossglockner discovered a twisted piece of metal embedded deep in the ice, part of a propeller blade, stamped with an identification number that had not existed in any U.S. Army Air Force registry. When it was removed from the glacier, the metal was cold to the touch, yet a faint vibration pulsed through it, as if something deep within still remembered motion. To this day, the Alpine Rescue Service maintains an unofficial record of what they call echo flights, unexplained aerial patterns detected by civilian weather radar during winter storms. The records show one common detail. The events are always silent. No noise. No engines. Only the soft hum that technicians describe as the sound between frequencies. A resonance that lingers in the headphones after the signal fades. And so the story endures. Maybe those 12 aircraft entered a pocket of distorted time, a frozen corridor of the atmosphere where the war never ended. Maybe they became energy trapped between memory and air, carrying their mission beyond the reach of history. Maybe the pilots never realized they'd crossed the line between life and legend. Every year, on the anniversary of their disappearance, locals say the sky grows unnaturally still. The wind dies, birds fall silent, and for a few minutes, the mountains hum a low, steady pulse that seems to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Those who listen carefully claim they can hear words woven into the silence. Formation holds, engines steady. No one knows if it's a haunting or an echo of physics itself, the earth remembering what man once carved into its sky. But one truth remains certain. Some flights never end. And when the air grows still and the stars over the Alps seem too close, listen carefully. You might just hear them still flying, still together. Eschew, silent.